simply to talk about the nature of this field and the role that Sri Aurobindo has in it. So I put this quote here from Sabatri. He heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts, re-echoing the vault of other minds. Just because Sri Aurobindo's thoughts, his ideas, are being reflected to some extent in the philosophies and the psychology teachings of other people throughout the world. Sometimes the source of these ideas is acknowledged and sometimes not. And that's true also in the case in transpersonal psychology. But nevertheless, some of the important themes and ideas of Sri Aurobindo's thought are reflected here. Next. So here's a simple definition of the field of transpersonal psychology. It's concerned with expanding the field of social inquiry into the study of optimal psychological health and well-being. It recognizes the potential for experiencing a broad range of states of consciousness, in some of which identity may extend beyond the usual limits of ego and personality. So this is by Roger Walsh and Francis Vaughan, who have kind of one of the important textbooks in the field. So I could just mention, perhaps as a corollary of this, that this field developed to some extent as some dissatisfaction with the usual field or with the mainstream field of psychology. And they wanted to go beyond and look at these other higher states of consciousness and include them, which was not being done in the traditional field of psychology. Okay, next. Okay, and I wanted to talk specifically about the origins of the field, because Sri Aurobindo had some role. So the field generally started in Northern California during the 1960s, although its roots extend a little bit further back. And some of the important people and writings that stimulated the formation of the field included William James, Howard Bloom, Abraham Maslow, Roberto Sergio, and Sri Aurobindo. And these are some of the important people that were involved in the founding of the field. Again, Maslow was a key person in that. Haridas Chowdhury, who I'll talk about some more, Alan Watts, Michael Murphy, James Fadman, Robert Fisher, Stanislaus Wolff, and Anthony Institute. Next. Okay, so partly where Sri Aurobindo's influence came in the origin of the field was with Haridas Chowdhury having been suggested by Sri Aurobindo himself to be one of the people involved in the formation of this new American Academy of Asian Studies, which was started in 1951. So he was a member, particularly with Frederick Spiegelberg, Alan Watts, in forming this new academy. And also, I'm not sure exactly the history of this, but apparently simultaneously, Chowdhury started the Cultural Integration Fellowship in San Francisco, which was referred affectionately by the people involved as the ashram. And so it's a building that is still there. It's an institution, a small institution that's still functioning in the heart of San Francisco. And somewhat later, as in 1968, the American Academy of Asian Studies unfolded, and Chowdhury took up this new successor organization, the American Academy of Asian Studies. So he started the same year. He began this new institution, which later became the California Institute of Integral Studies, which is there in San Francisco, which is a school focusing on kind of integral studies on transpersonal psychology, on various types of Eastern religion and spirituality. It has a wide range of different programs, but it includes also studies in transpersonal psychology. So apparently, someone had asked AUROBINDO, they were looking for people who might head this first organization, and I think somebody suggested whether Charlie might be a good person for this role, and AUROBINDO thought about it long and said, of course, he's so he does that. Okay, also looking into the history of it a little bit, I noticed that Judith Kriya was also centrally involved in the formation of that first organization in San Francisco. She later came to run the East-West Cultural Center in Los Angeles, and which is also still there as a center of culture. Some of the people that came from the ashram and gave lectures included Bill Kumar Roy and Bill Debbie were at the Asian Academy, and Michael Murphy and Dick Price were students there. These two people were very important because they later started Excellent Institute, which was another institute which was central in the development of transpersonal psychology. They were hosting many of the leaders in the field of transpersonal psychology to give workshops there. They were also bringing, a wide range of different cultural kind of events. I mean, they had Allen Ginsberg, the kind of the beat poets were coming, and they were having Indian and other types of music that were coming at Excellent Institute. So it became like a real center for this kind of new movement that was opening up to both the East and to the others, alternative states of consciousness, let's say. We go to the next one. Okay, so here's a little bit more Excellent, starting in 62. And Murphy also, he was a close student of Charlie, who was giving lectures, and he also was very much taken by AUROBINDO, and he came to the ashram here for some time, in 56 and 57, I think for about 6 months. And as I say, some of the other leaders of the field of transpersonal psychology and its origins were giving workshops there. Okay, thanks. Some other few important developments in the formation of this discipline was the journal, starting the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology in 1969. The Association of Transpersonal Psychology in 72, and then a new institute developed also in the San Francisco area, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which focused specifically on this discipline of studies, offering master's and PhD programs in 1975. Later on, a number of other institutes in the United States, and particularly in the Bay Area and California, but also gradually extending out to other parts of the country and to other parts of the world, began to develop. So, in my latest count, or something that I just saw about listings of institutes that were offering degree programs like master's or PhD programs in transpersonal psychology, or sometimes they're labeled somewhat differently and might, focus on a particular aspect of it or something. But there were about 20 institutions in the United States and about 20 institutions that I located in other parts of the world, mostly in Europe, most of them in Great Britain. About 5 or 6 of those were in Great Britain, and then others in other parts of Europe and Latin America, other places. Okay, now these are some of the contributors to the field of transpersonal psychology that have been influenced or strongly influenced by Sri Aurobindo. And now, not all of these were really, active on the American scene and in that discipline so much, but they were still forerunners that were important in the discipline, such as Sen, who was already had started with integral psychology back, I think, in the 40s and into the 50s, was doing work, but he was centered here in India, and particularly in the ashram, and writing and doing workshops and propagating Sri Aurobindo psychological thought within India. Spielberg mentioned, who was and Chowdhury, I don't know if who were all involved with the Academy of Asian Studies. And then A.S. Galal is an important person who has really been putting out all of these wonderful compilations of Sri Aurobindo's psychological thought on different topics, different aspects of it. At the same time, also contributing some very nice books of his own writing, synthesizing Sri Aurobindo's thought. Now, this next, Ken Wilber, is like one of the key people in transpersonal psychology now. And he was influenced by Sri Aurobindo and acknowledges him and his thought, especially and more so in his early work. And but at the same time, he integrates a lot of different streams of thought in his particular theory. And you could say that the essence of this theory is a combination of Sri Aurobindo's idea of the evolution of consciousness and integral development of the consciousness. At the same time, he incorporates into it or combines that with an idea, with a Buddhist idea, which generally is leading towards a kind of what I perceive it to be as a transcendent kind of state. But he looks at it as a unitary state of consciousness, which at the same time includes the cosmos and everything. Some of the other people on the right column are people, more recent contributors, the highest from here. Again, not really publishing so much in the American scene, but publishing from the ashram. And Ron Cartwright is somebody at CIIS now, at the California Institute of Integral Studies, that earlier institute that I was talking about, the faculty member there, who works particularly in the area of integral psychotherapy. But he's also just recently published the book, Integral Psychology, which pretty much outlines Sri Aurobindo's view of psychology. Michael Milovich, Arya Maloney, Joseph Ridley, these are all people that, and Don Salmon, have all written some books in the area and have all been strongly influenced by Sri Aurobindo. Next. I should just mention that the field itself is very broad. It's not focused on Sri Aurobindo. It's not focused in a sense. So it's focused on all kinds of different alternative Eastern points of view. So this interface of psychology with many different streams of thought. So Sri Aurobindo is still only like one small piece within this broad field. And the next slide. But here are some of the important themes that have become very important, I think, dominant, largely well accepted by many in the field of transpersonal psychology. And I think that these are ideas that we can trace back pretty closely to Sri Aurobindo. the evolution of consciousness, the sacredness of life and matter, the hierarchical structure of consciousness, the aim towards an integral development of the full consciousness. There's quite a bit of emphasis on the witness consciousness and developing that. There is growing, I would say, a stronger emphasis on the soul and psychic being. Ron Kortright is in particular kind of stressing that in his theory. Another psychotherapist, Kathleen Wall, who has been influenced by Sri Aurobindo, also emphasizes that in her work. And then disciplines such as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. These disciplines are also becoming more and more well known as part of the repertoire of transpersonal psychology. I think that's it. Is there any more? So this just gives you a broad kind of outline of this field, emerging field. It shows, I think, that Sri Aurobindo is having an influence in the field of psychology. However, I will at the same time say this emerging field of transpersonal psychology is still somewhat on the fringe. And though it's growing slowly. You know, I've mentioned there are maybe 40 institutions around the world that are offering programs in it. So it's not negligible, but yet it's still a small thing within the broader area of psychology. Thank you.
Just a quick announcement, if anyone else would like a certificate of attendance, please let us know as soon as possible, maybe in minutes before the tea break or just in the tea break. Thanks.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I am, of course, I will be speaking on ethical psychotherapy, but I am a bit dogmatic. I am totally focused on sheer Aurobiндо's integral yoga psychology. So just forgive me for that. My interest, because I am a practicing psychiatrist, my interest is very practical. How in a very practical area of our psychopathological field, we can bring down a psychological system of therapy which is modeled on a psychological perspective that comes out from Sri Aurobindo. Very difficult thing. You know, the first clue that was given to me was when I was asked by a thief, he gave me for relaxation. He said that you are a thief, you want to relax, well, of course. Stealing is such a tension, and it's stress job. But I say it's so difficult to keep a thief. That time I go. Now I can't tell that. Because many of the patients I've seen nowadays are gays and lesbians. How they can say? How they can only label a thief as something unethical. But he said, you don't understand. I am a very beautiful girl. And she has to be married. And if people know that I am a thief, well, she will not be married. So you have to take relaxation. So I was very surprised. And anyway, the next patient that I really wanted to relax was someone who was doing something in the stock market. Everybody was in stock market, and that time was Harsha Mehta's time. So it was a very, what we call, volatile time. And they said that this one is wanting to learn relaxation only because he can be a more efficient thief in the stock market. He will hunger people's money. So what is my aim of, what is the end result of my teaching relaxation? Then my philosopher friend told me, you are like a grocer. Does a grocer discriminate between customers? He has to give to everybody who comes to the grocery shop. So anyone who wants relaxation, you have to teach. So then I went to my grocer, asked, do you discriminate between customers? He said, of course. I understand better psychology than you. He said, how? Arey, it might be good, suited, coming in a very fanciful car, but he takes the cheapest toy from my shop. Somebody who is so solitary takes a good quality things. He understands psychology better. You see, that made me thinking that my teaching relaxation to a client has no value if it doesn't help a person to rise up in consciousness. You see, just teaching a relaxation for stress, what value it has? Until somebody goes a bit deeper, you know that it's something deeper has to be achieved. My problem is that counseling is my sadhana. This is my problem. And see, that is how I have been trying to bring down these psychological insights which are so widespread in Mother and Shiva's work in a very practical field. I will just take example of one day. The day I came here on Friday evening. This program started on 27. 26th I came in the evening. 26th, you see, the patients that I saw before I just took my flight. The first patient that came to me was a child, 5-year-old child, who was having muscular dystrophy. You know, and it was progressing. He was unable to walk the stairs. He was feeling very low, but he was very intelligent. And the problem was with the parents because they were rushing from one internet, they were taking the advice that they have got a miracle medicine somewhere and they were rushing here and there. And then ultimately nobody gives any miracle medicines. When people contact again, they oh no, this is an experimental place. You are just experimenting the medicine. Or we get relaxed. So then I told them about Shiva's theory of waste. You know, in 95, in one of the chapters he has given, in one paragraph he has given, why there is waste. What is the reason for waste? Why so much resources are lost? We have waste at every sphere, no? We have waste in the level of earthquakes, volcanoes, in our human life, civilization, so many things. We are having a dependent child, having a handicapped child also is a waste of resources. Why is there? They told it and then they were very happy and they accepted it. You see, the next patient I saw was a patient of dementia, and the people came and told that he has become a vegetable. You see that he doesn't understand anything. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't, you see, in dementia, the most important thing that we have to do is to train the caregivers. It's the caregivers they have to be trained. You have to accept it. I'm not treating the person outside, I'm treating the psychic being who is inside, the soul who is inside. You see, then I told them about the story of one of my seniors here. He was giving a lecture of Shirobindo at a place where there were only old people. And he was very frustrated. He said that I am giving a lecture of Shirobindo to only old people. And then in a flash of a second he saw that in every chair a small child was sitting and smiling. So when this happened, and he told me the next day I was giving a counseling program for terminal patients. And then I told this. You see, until the last moment, a person has a right to hear new things. Because we are addressing the psychic being within. You shouldn't get depressed. You know, and after that I make that point whenever I see counselors or terminal patients, because they always become depressed. And especially they are Buddhist counselors, they are more depressed. They are suffering. So we have to tell them. And you see, and the next patient I saw was very interesting. One of my Muslim acquaintances came running in a car. He said, what happened? You know, sir, there is no alternative. I have married a very good girl and I have no alternative but to commit suicide. He said, what? He said, I have told her everything. All the faults that I have done in my life, number of girls I killed, number of people I cheated, and every time, number of times I didn't buy the tickets in the bus, and every time she got out the book and hadith. For this, in here you have to have punishment for 6 months. For that, you have to be roasted in the hellfire for another 8 months. So like that, he fighted so much. No alternative. I have to commit suicide. So there those who were Muslim, I told him about the mother's description of Lord Balaji of Puducherry, whose eyes are blinded, who is absolutely non-judgmental. Even doesn't judge things according to our standards. And what we mean by ethics is not what we mean by ethics by what Aurobindo says. Because, see, ethics, one of the most important contributions which Aurobindo has in the area of ethics, when he goes, surpasses this ethics to a new type of ethics, is so important because so many times I am now using it in psychotherapy. When I deal with gay patients, and when I deal with patients, you see, frequently I am asked, especially because people know that I am connected with Mother and Aurobindo, frequently I am asked nowadays to give an opinion when a comatose patient is there in a life support system, what should be done? So if the system is delayed, the patient will die. If the system is on, the patient will not die, but your money is drained out. People don't know what to do. And these kind of questions they can't answer until you go to a supernatural voice. You take sure of the skills. But of course, for that you have to also have some supernatural faculties. You see, that because I was I've been in this trying to understand and develop this system. In some cases, I had gone and I had said that, oh, I see that the psychic being has left. This is just the outer body that is revealing. Please delete the system. In some cases, I had gone and said, now you keep the system going. You see, it requires a lot of. While I'm doing this in a very short way, it's not an easy thing to tell that. But all these things I could not have told, or it could not have come to me, or people would not have taken my advice unless I was doing something or the other for sure this perspective. So, another day, that day, Julia, 2-3 young girls asked me the same question. Can we love the same person with the same passion? Number of persons? More than one person can be loved with the same passion? They asked me. What answer will you give? Very difficult to answer. I said, well, sure, those people are metaphysically yes. If you take experience of creation. Then metaphysically yes. But psychologically, at the level of this level, where everything is divided, is a world of inequality, division, where things are lopsided, it's very difficult because he is going to speak of equality. This is the thing. This is the question nowadays girls ask us. Ask me. You know, India girls are changing. Frequently 23-year-old girls come and ask me, just we don't want to marry boys of our age. What they can give? You see, this is the type of existential question nowadays people ask. They can give, they can't rise up the value. In consciousness, they can't give anything. They can't give us anything in wisdom. Oh, we would rather prefer something dash. So, you see, this kind of questions, when they come, then you have to have answers from a different points, from a different perspective. Now, what I am wanting to say, if you want to develop, and if you want to develop really, and integral psychotherapy, it is a very beautiful thing, then we have to have a theory supporting it. Then we have to also have a theory of integral yoga psychology. That has to be developed first, because any therapy needs some support. So to present that psychology, you have to answer certain questions. Otherwise, the modern professional world of psychology will not accept it. The first is, how do you translate metaphysics into reality? How do you bring down that metaphysical thing? How do you bring that into very concrete reality? Very difficult to answer. This is something which we are working in psychology, we have to answer. But you see that Aurobindo has also given us these points that, and this thing, that the spiritual paradigm of consciousness speaks of something and the materialistic paradigm speaks of something else. Why do you mix the two? Can you mix the two? Can you bring the two together? Very difficult. Again, you see, you can't answer unless you take sure with this point. It will stop. I usually go by the audience mode. Sorry. When the audience is bored, so what I'm bringing up for what is that at the high level what was sexual number, at the lower level that gets driven up. And that is the same thing that is divided at the lower level. And at the lower level of reality we can manifest the higher level too. This is what Aurobindo has given us. And the second thing is that those who study consciousness, they say that we have answered all questions. There is one question that is unanswered. Then what is the hard problem of consciousness? The hard problem of consciousness is that how can consciousness, with its variegated colors, with its fragrance, with its variety, emerge from something which is totally inert, totally lifeless, lackluster, boring, something of that matter? How it can come? See, you cannot give that answer unless you go back to Aurobindo, who explains that it is possible because the higher consciousness is involved in the lower conscience. You see, only if you can present that in a way which is acceptable to the modern professional psychological mind, we will be able to present empirical yoga psychology to the modern people or to the modern psychological mindset. We'll skip, I'll just show you one slide. No, next. We have not come to that. Not this. See, this is a model. Next one. Next. This is the model that I use. You see, in any psychotherapy, I will say I will explain all this for you. We have to give this time for this. So, as a practicing psychotherapist, any practicing psychotherapist has two classification systems. One, the official system, which is used for statistics, by the DSM, the ICD, all these things. But there is a classification system which belongs to you. Now, for us who are practicing integral psychology, this is the system where we are trying to understand the personality. It's not complicated, it's open-ended. Where we study the outer being, the inner being, the inmost being, the psychic being behind. And what I want you to do is that we have to understand the psychopathologies in the different levels of this being. And where the person is present, not only the psychopathology, but the position of the person in this scale, and then devise your therapeutic modality. You see, a person might have depression. Depression is there in the outer vital. But you see, there are different people that have depressions. If a person like Van Gogh has a depression, whose inner vital is very strong, so naturally, and a very rustic, who has no aesthetic sense, if he has depression, both the depression is in the outer vital. But my approach will be different. You see, a person who is very rustic, who doesn't have any aesthetic sense, and to focus more on the outer vital. A person who has a phenotype, the inner vital just turning that inward things a bit better. In therapy, you just work at the inner level, and it works. And a person who is a yogi, whose psychic being is also very responsive, you just have to make a little bit of inward turning, and the thing clicks. You see the same problem. One has to see where is the problem and the position of the person. That is important. So different therapies act at different levels of this structure that we have to gradually understand. The inner being goes down to the subconscious, unconscious, and up to the superconscious. And inner being is connected to the cosmic consciousness, from where all things enter. And together with this, there is another thing from the cosmic consciousness. Good things can enter the inner being, the bad things can also enter the inner being. In fact, you see, the last patient I saw before I boarded the plane on Friday was a lady who was having headaches for 30 years. You know, one day, this time she had a relapse of a headache. One day she came and told me, I was seeing my thoughts hanging over my head. She's a doctor, what had cleared to me. And she came and told me that my thoughts is standing over my head. Immediately I took her. I didn't ask anybody to ask her even. I gave her the electric current. Immediately I gave her. And then she said, if you didn't give me that current, I would have committed suicide then and there. And then I understood, after I get the ECT, you see, she had made negative formations. I want to die, I want to die, I want to die for 30 years. And those negative ideas have become a strong formation. They had an identity of their own. And they were possessing this person. You know, we see possession states. By whom we are possessed? There are also outward things which possess us. But there are our own things that can become a formation and that can possess us. And outward things can also possess us. They enter the inner being from the cosmic consciousness. You see, occultism is also a very important thing in psychology. Aurobindo said that psychology will be incomplete unless you understand occultism and recognize the importance of occultism. So it's a different subject. It's a different thing altogether. You cannot say that all in one go. What I am saying is that integral yoga psychology of Aurobindo has given this very beautiful framework of reference. This is not in competition with other systems, mind you. This is not like anything. You can work with any system. This system is so flexible. You can work with it alone, or you can work with your own system and enlarge the scope by taking help from this system. If I am a Freudian therapist, I can take help from this system and also acknowledge the superconscious along with the unconscious. If I am a Jungian therapist, you see that I accept the collective consciousness, but I also accept that the ego has to be replaced one day by a beyond below principle. You see, the human mind loves variations. Like we like different therapies. We go to allopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda, all therapies we like. So the human mind will always like different type of psychotherapies. But each therapy each therapeutic system can take light from this framework which Shiodo has given and enlarge his or our own scope. You can use it alone or you can use it also separately. Together with your other systems, enlarging its environment, enlarging its scope. So this is the joy of integral psychotherapy. I know that you will brand me as too Aurobindo and dogmatic, but actually it is a very beautiful thing. When I speak of it nowadays to my professional colleagues, they accept it. They acknowledge it. It is only the Aurobindonians who tell me, don't talk Aurobindo always, don't talk Aurobindo. Talk something else, otherwise they will misinterpret us. Nothing to be misinterpreted. This is such a beautiful system, it can be presented to the world. What we have developed ourselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mansi, and I'm a student of psychology doing my PhD at the University of Delhi. No, I need to change a few words here. I'm a disillusioned student of psychology doing my PhD at the University of Delhi. My topic for today is the psychologist search thyself. And I share with you my personal groping and my personal disillusionment with psychology as it is being practiced today and as it is being taught to us today. What is this modern psychology? Modern psychology claims to be a scientific study of human nature and its processes. But sadly, it falls short on all the fronts. It uses methods employed by science to study its subject, but there is a major difference between science and psychology. Science studies outward phenomena, whereas psychology studies the inward phenomena. So it needs to develop methods which are more inner, which are subtler, and which are more plastic. Aurobindo has defined psychology as the science of consciousness and its status and operation in nature. And if that can be glimpsed or experienced, its status and operation beyond what we know as nature. It is not enough to observe and know the movements of our surface nature and the superficial nature of other living creatures, just as it is not enough for science to observe and know electricity only through the movement of lightning in the clouds, or for the astronomer to observe and know only those movements and properties of the stars that are visible to the unaided eye. Here, as there, a whole world of occult phenomena have to be laid bare and brought under control before the psychologist can hope to be a master of his province. Even the movements of this little surface nature cannot be understood, nor its true law discovered, until we know all that is below or behind and supplies it, and know too all that is around it and above. Thus, a scientific study of the human nature in all its depths, in all its wideness, and in all its relations has to be both experiential as well as experimental, but psychology is unable to do so today. It still suffers from the fallacies that psychology has been suffering from since this time it started. And Aurobindo says that the old European system of psychology was just such a pseudo-scientific system. Its observations were superficial, its terms and classification arbitrary, its aim and spirit abstract, empty and scholastic. In modern times, a different system and method are being founded, but the vices of the old system persist. The observations made have been incoherent, partial, or morbid and abnormal. The generalizations are too wide for their meager substratum of observed data. The abstract and scholastic use of psychological terms and the old metaphysical ideas of psychological processes still bandage the eyes of the infant knowledge, mar its truth, and hamper its progress. These old errors are strangely entwined with a new fallacy which threatens to vitiate the whole inquiry, the fallacy of the materialistic prepossession. It is true that psychology has developed over the years, It has expanded to understand the inner phenomena better. But it is doing so by the limited instrument of the mind. It is still following the bottom-up perspective to study the phenomena. That is, studying a vaster phenomenon by looking through a tunnel vision. What is required is that psychology needs to revamp its orientation. It needs to adopt a top-down perspective to understand this phenomena called human nature, and to understand and to understand the purpose and the future of humanity. Psychology is at the cusp of science and yoga, and it needs to move into the realm of yoga to fulfill itself. Sri Aurobindo gives modern psychology its space, but he also shows where it needs to go. Says that it is true that modern psychology has probed the internal law of living matter and consciousness and arrived at results which are remarkable, but limited and fundamentally inconclusive. It is true also that modern inquiry, probing into psychological as opposed to physiological phenomena, has discovered certain truths that are equally discovered by yogic processes. The role of the subconscious, the subliminal, double or multiple personality. But its observations in these fields are of an extremely groping and initial character. It is only by yoga process that one can arrive at an instrumentation which will drive large, wide roads into the psychological unknown, and not only obscure and narrow tunnels. The field of psychology needs a direct inner psychological instrumentation by which we can arrive at sure data and sure results into ourselves, verified by equally sure data and results into our observation of others, and of the hidden psychological world and its play of unseen forces. The physical is the outwardly seen and sensed and needs physical instruments for its exploration. The psychological is the physically unseen and unsensed, to be discovered only by an organization of the inward senses and other now undeveloped and occult means. It is through consciousness, by an instrumentation of consciousness only, that the nature and laws and movements of consciousness can be discovered. And this is the method of yoga. Thus, there is a growing pressure on psychology to expand itself, to evolve, to spread its wings and fly. But one can't fly with feet of clay. What is required is a leap of faith, to discover the freedom of flight, and then to view what lies below. But this has to be done by the luminous blaze of the psyche, and not by the candlelight of the mind. I'm reminded of a poem by Sri Aurobindo titled as Science and the Unknowable. It applies to psychology as well. Man's science builds it abstracts, cold and brief, and cuts to formulas the living whole. It is a brain and hand without a soul, an eye that tests the outward carved relief. Blind to the depths, the occult roots unshown, the visible hides its base in the unseen. The invisible guards the truth, its symbol mean in a yet deeper invisible's unknown. The objects we would prove are not their form. Each is a mass of forces, veiled as shape, whose ends we seize, but the inner lines escape in a fathomless consciousness above mind's norm. Mind's peering gaze meets only abysses still, infinite, wayless, mute, unknowable. I wonder how much longer psychology will flounder in these abysses, lost and wayless. Thank you.
Once, the mother was asked to give one indication, to give one sign which will show and prove that one is ready for the spiritual path. Mother said, that one sign, that one indication is equality of the soul. And if Mother has said that, I think we should know a little more about equality in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. We'll first try and understand what is equality. Equality means not to be disturbed by any unpleasant things that happen, or not to be excited by any pleasant things that happen. Means equality means a quiet and unmoved mind and vital. Equality also means self-mastery over vital movements of anger, pride, sensitiveness, even self-mastery over desire. Equality does not allow the vital moments to take hold of the emotional being, because it is the emotional being that can create a lot of disturbances. So equality will not allow us to speak in rush and act in rush, but from the calm poise of the spirit. The basis of inward peace is equality. What we just saw was the first part of equality, because equality also has a second part. Now this part of equality, second part, means to have an equal view of all human beings and their nature. This part also believes that the same divinity is present in me, it's present in you, in all the humanity. The same divinity is present in the plant life, as well as this is available also in the mineral life. And if this is so, then we should give equal response to everything, all beings. And this equal response comes from the divine nature in us. So this is the second part of the equality. The first part, which I just talked, in normal terms is also known as equanimity. In Sri Aurobindo's terminology is known as passive equality or a negative equality. Now this passive and negative equality can liberate us from the ignorance and admit us to the calm poise of the divine peace. The second part, where we give equal response to everybody, equality, is known as a positive equality or an active equality, which will liberate us into the higher nature and admit us not only to peace but also ananda. So negative equality leads us to peace. The positive equality leads us to peace and ananda. We will just quickly see, first understand, if one has an equality, what are the benefits of equality in normal human life? I'm not talking of spiritual life. Number one, as in any problematic situation, there are no emotions involved. What would happen is your thinking becomes clear. The second advantage is that as you can see in a problem what is behind it, you'll be able to solve it in a much more professional and a much more perfect manner. The third benefit that exists because of equality is that as you can see the reasons behind all situations, you can progress faster in life. The fourth advantage I feel in equality is that you can understand human nature much better, why they behave, and your dealing in the human nature improves. And what happens is you create a situation of harmony around you. And the last, fifth advantage I personally feel is that it is not only you who is benefited, but all the people around you will be benefited in terms of their progress. After having seen the advantages in just normal human life, let us go into see how to develop this equality. Now, each human being is different. And so Sri Aurobindo has given us different methods to develop equality, and one can take up one. But what I'm now talking of is to develop passive equality and negative equality, not the part of the positive equality. The first method which Sri Aurobindo talks is known as endurance. Endurance means all unpleasant things that you have in life, you bear them, you suffer them. Now what happens is, Sri Aurobindo says that we just saw the map which Dr. Basu pointed out, where he showed the outer being. Sri Aurobindo says the outer being has no capacity to bear or to endure. He says if it is able to bear, it is because of the strength of the spirit within. So through this process of endurance, What we are trying to do is bring out the strength of the spirit within to the outer being. And in this process of endurance, there are three powers of the soul that come out. When you start enduring, what was earlier unbearable now becomes bear. So the capacity to bear and suffer increases. So it will require a much greater force to upset. Second thing happens is that there is a differentiation in the nature that takes place. There is one outer being which still suffers, which still reacts to every situation. And there is a second being which is of higher reason and will, which is a witness, which observes quietly and sees. He does not participate in the suffering. We have to try to live more with the higher reason and the will. And slowly the third power will take over. That is, the higher will and reason will affect the outer being, and that too will become calm and quiet. Now, when we have applied this to the unpleasant things in life, then the process is you apply the same process to all the pleasant things. Instead of getting excited with all the good things that happen in life, you have learned to remain a witness, a quiet person. The second process which Sri Aurobindo talks of is impartial indifference. Now the first one, what we saw, was mainly a method of karma yoga, where you have to put in more will. The second is more based on the knowledge. This attitude of impartial indifference believes or is based on that all the passions of the mind, all the small petty pleasures or troubles in life are too insignificant compared to the calm poise of the spirit, compared to the aim one has in life. And this premises is built on that the mind need not be attached to all the petty pleasures in the mind. If a soul chooses, it can get away from all these things. It is something like a man trying to hold a pillar tight and shouts, "Help me, I want to get rid of the pillar, I'm not able to do it." Moment the man understands that it is not the pillar which is catching him, it is he who is catching the pillar, he'll be able to come out. Similarly, when a man understands that these petty problems, it is more out of habit, it is more out of emotion, we get attached to it. And the moment it realizes this, it can get detached to it. Even in this method, there are three powers of the soul that takes place. So in this attitude, it rejects the repulsion of the pain and unpleasant things, and it also rejects the attraction of the happiness and pleasant things by tranquil observing will. This method puts away desire from the mind because it believes that it is a desire which creates the maximum trouble in life. In this process, the emotional mind is quieted, so the disturbances becomes the minimum. Here too, in this method, when one progresses, there are two paths that are slowly seen. One part, again of higher reason and will, is calm. It does not get attached to all the problems of life. It sees them. It doesn't give sanction nor rejects it. It just observes. The second part, I think I started at 3:18 and I need to be given 10 minutes. So again, there is a partition that takes place. And in this partition, the outward still reacts. Slowly, if one lives on the higher reason and will, it's the inner being that will influence the outer, and that too will become quiet. The third method is the method of submission. The third part can be called a part of the bhakti yoga. The third way of the submission is to depend on the will of the God. It's an unegoistic acceptance that all that happens in life is nothing but the divine, supreme, universal will. Or there is nothing but surrender to the divine. In this method, all the touches in the life are accepted as the touches of the divine. All the experience that one has are nothing but a play of the divine. And when one accepts that all touches, all experiences are nothing but the touches of the divine, everything becomes delightful. And when everything becomes delightful, the pain and suffering is absolutely eliminated or surely reduced. In this method, in this method, there is an unegoistic acceptance that everything happens is the divine will. So the knot of the ego is loosened and the personal claims become unimportant. All the context that one has is referred to the master of the being. Here the most important is how to attain to the divinity, how to get a contact with the divinity, how to become an instrument in the hands of the divine, how to be channel of the divine, how to be a servant of the divine, or how to be the lover of a divine, rejoicing in the divine and relation with the divine. In this method also there will be a division that takes place. The lower mind, which its habit of emotions gets attached to it, and there is a higher psychical mind of love and self-giving. And slowly the outer mind also as in other processes get enveloped with the love, and that also becomes quiet. I will not dwell on the fourth and fifth point, just mention it. That these are the 3 points which Aurobindo has stressed many times. The fourth point is that the renunciation of desire, attachment to the work as well as the fruit of the work. The fifth method can be called a method where the descent of the higher consciousness peace descends in the being. It can also lead to equality. Now, what is the measurement to see that one has attained to equality? The measurement is when there is a fixed peace or shanti in the whole being, one can be sure that one has attained to this. Unless and until a person has attained to the negative equality or this positive equality, he cannot proceed to the positive equality. But I think for the lack of time, I'll just try and skip this positive equality, partly because it is not an experience which most of us have, including me. And to explain it and to bring the method becomes really difficult because a part of our experience is easy to understand. But we will quickly see what are the benefits of equality in a spiritual life. We just saw in the start of the talk that the one thing, if one has equality, that is the first indication that you are meant to be on the path of the spiritual path. Another occasion, Mother even went to the extent that one, when is near the psychic being, one strong indication that comes is when one has a complete equality, where you can be sure you are nearer to your psychic. The second advantage is that before one has a spiritual experience or descent of any of the higher forces, a strong foundation of equality is a must. Mother says the one drop of divinity can make a person dance, sing, and become absolute, or scream and become unbalanced. Unless there is a firm foundation, it cannot be brought down. Because Mother explains in that very way that the divine forces are 1,000 times more powerful than a cyclonic thing. So it needs to have a very strong base before we can aspire for higher forces to descend or the spiritual experiences that we can have. If one wants to go and have an inner journey, again, it is through equality that one can start this inner journey. In fact, by equality of the heart, we open the gates of a profounder, deeper being. The fourth advantage, which is the last advantage, Sri Aurobindo says that the supreme divine nature is founded on equality. If we have gone through the process of equality, the advantage we have is that we are elevated into the divine nature. He even in the same book, chapter goes to the extent of saying, if you want to change the substance of your being to the substance of the self, the method again is equality. I end this talk with just one line of Mother's prayers and meditation. It is in the most complete peace, serenity, and equality that all is thought. Thank you.